All right. So Pop says that he believes that he coveted, he meaning Ananias coveted something here and kept back some of the price, which is interesting. This is interesting. So Steve, you want to add to that? Say that one more time. All right. God knows your secret. So say more about that. Yes. Okay. 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 Yes. All right. So Steve adds that God knows our secrets, right? I mean, he knows every detail. And no one knew about Achan and his sin. I mean, God knew it, but no one, but man didn't know it, but God knew it, and clearly God knew it with Ananias and Sapphira as well, right? All right. So this is good. We see these connections here. And we won't spend too much time here because we got to get back to Joshua. But uh, this is interesting that this is an offering that's being made, right? Um, no different than we make offerings, right? On most Sundays. But these two individuals lost their lives because they lost their lives in the midst of this offering. And I just wonder, man, if I wonder if God did that even now to us, right? I mean, and what drove this? What's interesting about the story in Achan, and we didn't go back and read it, is Achan actually fessed up and said, look, and I'm paraphrasing, I succumbed to covetousness. That's what he says, right? He says, I was overcome by covetousness, and as a result of that, I stole this, this, and this. Ananias and Sapphira do not make that claim. We don't read in here where they say, you know what, we got caught out with covetousness. It's hard for me to say the word. And so this is what we did. So my question is, then how do we know? We know that they kept back some of the price. All right. I mean, for those of us still working, I'm making an assumption. Maybe I don't know this to be true, but when you get your paycheck, don't raise your hand. But do you give it all on Sunday, or do you keep back some of it? Would be the question. What the question is? What's the difference? And why is it that Ananias and Sapphira lost their lives because they kept back some of the price? Don't we all keep back some of the price? What do you think, Linda? I'm sorry, a little louder for me. Oh, interesting. Linda says that she believes that they wanted the credit for giving, but they didn't really want to give. Is that your point? Or give fully, give completely? All right. This is good. The driver here. We'll say this part, and then we'll move back to Joshua. In Achan's case, again, as a reminder, God plainly said when they took Jericho that everything in that city belonged to who? Him. So when Achan took it, he was really doing what? Stealing from who? Stealing from God. I want to submit to you that Ananias and Sapphira are guilty of the same thing. And the way that we know that, the driver for us in Acts 5 is verse 2. That two-word term, kept back some of the price for himself. Kept back. That is the driver. That's what sort of unlocks this passage for us. The original language, the Greek language used for that term, kept back. Don't worry about the word. The word is nophiso. But that's not, I want you to know what it means. Don't worry about the word itself. But the word nophiso means to embezzle. So another way to say that is that Ananias embezzled some of the price for himself. Now, embezzling means literally that you are secretly stealing something that belongs to someone else. And this opens up a whole lot of that. I mean, we could spend 5 classes on giving and what that means and who the resources really belong to before we give them in the first place and so on and so forth. It carries with it this idea. And again, the scriptures don't plainly tell us, but that word seems to suggest that Ananias and Sapphira and all the other people who gave. In the verse before that, Joseph, who we also know as Barnabas, also gave. There were a lot of people who sold things and gave. We infer from this that Ananias and Sapphira probably made a pledge about what they were going to give. And we infer that they probably pledged that we're going to sell this land and everything that all the proceeds will go to God. But because of covetousness, probably, they kept back some of the price, meaning that they probably made a pledge, but then they withheld some of that pledge, and now they lost their lives for it. So I just want us to see that I mean, again, there are many things, there are many points and lessons we can learn from that. But this notion that they embezzled the proceeds of the land carries with it the idea that those proceeds belong to God and they took some back. There are implications. What about the pledges we make to God, right? And are we taking some back? Paul told the Corinthians when he was trying to rally them to take up a collection for the saints. I believe it's in chapter 16, I believe. And I think this is the one because it comes up in a couple places. But he is encouraging them as he's encouraging them to set aside money to help the saints who are in need, probably the saints in Jerusalem. He tells them, I want you to set this money aside because I don't want your pledge to be undermined by your covetousness. In other words, I don't want your burning desire to go to Starbucks to get in the way of what you are saying you're going to give to God. Does that make sense? I don't want your burning desire for this other thing to get in the way of what you have committed to give to God. So go ahead, set that aside so that your gift won't be spoiled by covetousness. Lots of lessons for us there. Yes, sir. Yep. Interesting question. Number one, there are literally a handful of examples that we have about the way that the New Testament church gave. I gave this one. There's a couple passages in the Corinthians and a few others where we know that collections were taken up for particular purposes. One of the things that we can learn from that is a term you just used interchangeably, I think, pledge versus predetermined. And I believe that based on what we learn from the scripture, that they're the same thing. What we predetermine in our heart is the pledge. That is the pledge, right? And that's why, and it's interesting. Paul, even as he's writing, particularly to the Corinthian church, he never prescribes a dollar amount. He doesn't say that you have to give 10% of your income or you have to give this much money. He just says each one must determine in his heart what you're going to give. And whatever that determination is, you see it through. Great question, Jeff. Great question. All right, let's keep going. So that's where we pet last week. We want to look at hopefully Joshua 9 and 10. We got about 15 minutes left. I need 2 readers who will read for us, 2 individuals. Melissa says yes, and Mark says yes. Okay, so Mark, I'm gonna start you out with verse 9. You kind of know the drill, chapter 9, pardon me, of Joshua chapter 9. You know the drill. If you would, start us out with the first 13 verses. First 13 verses, and then we're gonna look at 14 through 27. But before we look at Joshua 9, I forgot about this. I want us to look at 2 passages in the book of Deuteronomy. Let's start at Deuteronomy chapter 7. I will read these. And I want this to frame what Mark is going to read in Joshua 9. Deuteronomy chapter 7. Let's start there. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. All right, Deuteronomy 7. First 6 verses. Listen to what God's word says. This is the law. When the Lord your God shall bring you into the land where you are entering to possess it, and shall clear away many nations before you, the Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God shall deliver them before you, you shall defeat them, and you shall defeat them. Then you shall utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them and show no favor. This is the law. Verse 3, furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take their daughters for your sons. For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you. Verse 5, but thus you shall do to them. You shall tear down their altars and smash their sacred pillars and hew down their Asherim and burn their graven images with fire. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his own possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. That's the law. Now, Joshua 9. Joshua 9, first 13 verses, please, sir. Excellent. So we're going to hold up here just for a second. So are you following what's happening here? Are we following what's happening? Right? We have Joshua and the nation. They are approached by this group of Canaanites. These are individuals, obviously, who live in the land of Canaan. And if you paid close attention, there's a verse in here that tells us not just where these individuals are from, but there's a verse in here that tells us sort of what brand or branch of Canaanite this group is. So did you track with that? So somebody tell me, what number one, where did these individuals come from who approached Joshua and the nation? What city did they come from? There's a verse in there that tells us the city. Which city is it? What is it? Gibeon, very good. Verse 3 tells us that these individuals came from Gibeon. There's another verse that tells us Gibeon, of course, is in the land of Canaan. It's near Jericho, it's near Jerusalem, right? Okay. Now, there's another verse in here that tells us kind of what brand or what cultural group of Canaanites these individuals from Gibeon are from. What group is it? Yep. What verse is that? Verse 7, the Hivites, right? So, and the men of Israel said to the Hivites, the same individuals. Now, remember what we just read in Deuteronomy chapter 7. What was God's law to the nation as they were preparing to go into this new land? God gave a restriction. And what was that restriction that he gave to them in Deuteronomy 7? Do you remember? We just read it. All right, so do not intermarry was certainly part of it. What else did he say? That's it. God says don't intermarry. He also says do not make a covenant with the people who are in the land. That's what he says. But these people who came to him, what do they want him to do? They want him to make a covenant. All right, Mark, let's keep going. Let's see how it plays out. 14 through 27, please. Excellent. Well done. Well done. All right. We got about 7 minutes before class will be over. So I just have a couple of thoughtful questions for you, some of which the answers are not found directly in this text. So you got to really think about the circumstance and what you know about God. Here's my first question. Did Joshua and the elders with him break God's law? Yes or no? All right. I hear a couple of yeses. All right. Which law did they break? Okay. So God said earlier that when they go into the new land, they should not make covenants with the cities of the land, and yet they did that. So they broke God's law. So yes, you are, those of you who said yes, you are correct. I do want to point out, and I'll ask you to, for the purpose of this exercise, to take my word for it, that yes, they broke God's covenant, and yet here in this context, and if we kept reading into the future happenings of the nation of Israel, we never find where there is a consequence for the nation for doing so. Now, they broke God's covenant when they went to Jericho and Achan stole some of the goods there. They suffered a consequence. There are other times where they broke God in their wanderings and sojourning, where they broke God's covenant and they suffered consequences for it. Here, God plainly said in Deuteronomy 7, do not make covenants with the people or the cities in the promised land. They do so with those of Gibeon, and they do not suffer consequence, even though, and so I just want you to keep that in the back of your head. Now, second question, and this one you can get from the text. The Gibeonites, who are also known as the Hivites, based on verse 7, why is it that they wanted to make a covenant with the nation of Israel? What was their motivation? Why did they want to do that? Don't be scared. Speak up. Why? Because why? Okay. They were scared. And what were they? You're correct. What were they scared of? Okay. They were scared of God and they were scared of being annihilated, right, by the nation of Israel as they were coming in. So they wanted to make a covenant for protection. And by the way, how is it that they even knew about what God had done through the nation of Israel? How did they even learn about that? How did they know about that? They heard of it, right? They heard of it. They heard about what they did coming out of Egypt. They heard about what they had done to Jericho and to Ai. They had heard about it, and now they were fearing for their lives, right? And they asked for a covenant of protection. We all agree that the nation under Joshua and the elders broke God's law by making this covenant, but we understand why the Gibeonites wanted them to make the covenant. So now I ask you this question. Again, there is no evidence that God ever punished the nation in any way for doing this. So my question to you is, were they, the nation, were they right or wrong in making this covenant? Yes, sir. Sure. Okay. Say that one more time, please. They did not. Yes. So the answer is yes. I'm going to repeat Mark's question, particularly if there are others online. Mark is asking, is it possible that Joshua and the nation believed that these Gibeonites were actually from a place not part of Canaan, but from a remote place? And the answer is yes. And they actually come and present themselves as such, right? They put on this whole masquerade, right? They claim that they're from this faraway place, although they never say where that place is. They intentionally leave their city Gibeon with worn out clothes, old food, old wine, old shoes to give the appearance that they had traveled a long way. So the answer is absolutely yes. They probably believe that. My question is, was the nation wrong for doing it? God had his law in Deuteronomy 7. Don't do it. Although they don't know, I mean, Mark's point is right. In this moment, they don't know that these individuals really are from Canaan. The question is, were they wrong for making this decision on the spot? Because did you notice verse, did you notice verse, was it, verse 14? I get right to it. Did you notice verse 14? And we got to end here in about 3 minutes. Verse 14 says, so the men of Israel took some of their provisions and did not ask for the counsel of the Lord. Were they wrong or right for making this covenant is my question. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna repeat what Steve says. And I'm using his words. Steve says they made a snap decision. That was your term, without consulting with God, based on what they saw and a conclusion they drew about what these folks were telling them. Right. They made a snap decision. A covenant was a big deal. Right. And so they did everything you said. And yet, again, if you take my word for it, God never sanctioned them for doing this. We agree that they broke God's law. We agree that the Gibeonites tricked Joshua and the elders and all of that. They did not consult God. They made what appears to be a snap decision, and yet God never punished them for that. So we're going to end with this. I want you to think about this, and we'll pick it up next week because there's more to this story than what we read just here in chapter 9. I want you to ponder this for next week. How is other than the trickery involved, how is what the Gibeonites asked for any different than what Rahab asked for? That's what I want you to think about. Did not Rahab ask for protection? Did she not ask for protection because she had heard about what God had done with the Israelites coming out of Egypt and so on and so forth? So my question is, how is what she asked for, or how is what they asked for any different than what she asked for? Other than the fact that the Gibeonites came with trickery and Rahab did not. We will pick that question up next week. Thanks, everybody.